Hi, everybody. I'm Joyce Graff from the Brookline Senior Center, and I'm going to talk today about making masks. And these masks are sewn. We do have another program on masks that you can do without sewing. So it's possible to make one even if you don't have a sewing machine or if you're not handy with a needle and thread. But these are recommended for sewing. I'm going to show you how to make it on a sewing machine. If you don't have a machine, yes, you can do this by hand. It'll take you a little longer, but that's just fine. We're going to make some masks that look like this. They look like the ones they hand out at the hospital, but they're made of cloth, 2 layers of cotton cloth, and I'll tell you a little bit more about materials as we go forward. First of all, why are we making homemade masks these days? Because we are used to being able to purchase them and dispose of them, but the disposable culture sort of catches up with you, especially when the demand is this high. They're hard to come by. So we want to make sure that the best masks are reserved for the people who are at the highest risk. And that's our medical personnel and our first responders, the police, the fire, anybody who's going to have to come into contact with another person and not know whether that person has COVID-19. So those of us who can stay away from other people, who can practice that social distancing that we talk about, these homemade masks are perfectly fine, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that as we go along. The primary purpose of them is to keep your own germs to yourself, not to protect yourself from others so much as to keep your germs to yourself, because for 2 weeks you could feel you're fine and you could be spreading the virus to someone else. So in Asia, they actually call them courtesy masks. You're being courteous to other people by keeping your own germs to yourself. And you can see in this image from Japan that people riding the subway and walking on the streets are wearing masks. It's very common to see Asians wearing masks. So first of all, it reduces it keeps your own germs to yourself, but it also does reduce your exposure to other people's germs. Don't touch your face and keep your distance from other people. Stay that 6 feet away from other people and wash your hands a lot. So don't touch your face, because that's the primary way that we transfer germs from surfaces that we touch, doorknobs, elevator buttons, all of that. You get the germs on your hands. It's unavoidable, but don't carry them to your face. And when you have a mask on, it's going to help you remember that you're wearing this mask in order to remember not to touch your face. But it also means that you don't want to be fussing with the mask. People ask me about filters. The tighter the weave of the fabric that you're using, the better it is. But it does need to be 100% cotton so that it's breathable. So you can use more layers. You could put a 3rd layer of cloth since you're making it yourself. You could also use some interfacing, which does improve its ability to filter out things. But it needs to be something you can breathe through. And again, not fuss with it, but leave it in place for the whole time that you're out going to the grocery store or whatever. So you need to be able to breathe through it and not have to adjust it. It should fit around your face pretty well. So you don't want open edges around the corners of it. People ask me if you should put paper towels or coffee filters or even vacuum cleaner bags in it to help filter. They might help a little bit, but I'm frankly concerned about them. Not so much about coffee filters, but certainly about paper towels and vacuum cleaner bags, because they may well have chemicals in it that are intended to improve them as products for the purpose they were intended for. Like make sure that the paper towels smell good, that the color is great, but were those chemicals intended to be inhaled into your lungs? I'm not so sure about that. And vacuum cleaner bag filters, some of them have actually glass particles in them, and those would not be healthy for your lungs. So I'm not a fan of any of the filter alternatives except for interfacing. If you have it on hand, fine. If you don't, 2, even 3 layers of fabric would be fine, and you can breathe through it and it'll fit around you. So let's keep in mind the goals of this project. We want something that's washable and reusable. We want you to keep your germs to your own self. Don't touch your face because you don't want to transfer germs from your hands into your mucous membranes inside your body. Keep your hands clean before you handle that mask and after you take it off, and avoid transferring germs from hand to face. Remove that mask carefully. It's now contaminated. Wash it and wash your hands. So the CDC says that cloth face covering should fit snugly but comfortably against the side of your face, be secured with ties or ear loops, either one is fine. Use multiple layers of fabric, allow breathing without restriction, and be able to be laundered and machine dried or hand washed for all that and air dried without damage to the mask or changes in shape. Those are the primary goals. And I should say a word too about people who should not wear masks. Anybody under 2 or anybody who's not able to take the mask on and off without help should not be wearing a mask. We'll stay away from that person and protect them in a different way. So first we have to choose the fabric and cut the fabric, the face and the backing. And the recommendation is that you have a different fabric on both sides so that you can tell which one's the inside, which one's the outside. Just in case you take it off and put it on in a given session, you won't put it on backwards. So you should use 100% cotton. It is possible to use t-shirt material. If you do, look on the label, see that it's 100% cotton, so we're sure that it's washable and breathable. Synthetics will block the airflow and trap the heat, so it will become uncomfortable over time. For most adults, you want to cut pieces that are 6 by 9 inches, sort of landscape, that way, wider than they are tall. That's landscape in art terms. And if there are any stripes or patterns, they need to be so that you'll enjoy looking at it when it's landscape like that. You'll need 2 7-inch lengths of ribbon or cord, something to go over the ears. You can certainly use elastic, but be sure it's not too wide. About 1/4 inch wide is optimal. And if you don't have something that will be comfortable over the ears, you can make ties. If you're going to make ties, they should be about 15 inches long, and you'll need 4 of them, 2 for the top and 2 for the bottom of your mask. Other tools, you'll need sewing tools like needle and thread would be great. This sewing machine, of course. And if you're making children's masks, ages 5 and up, should be 5 by 7.5 with the elastic at 6 inches, and the little kids 3 to 5 cut to 4 by 6 and 5-inch elastic or cord. What I often use for children, by the way, is shoelaces, because they're the flat ones. They're soft around the ears, easy to work with, and if they're too long, you just tie a knot in it, and it works quite well. The first thing we're going to do is make a homemade ruler for the pleats. And you can see I took just a 1-inch strip or so of a piece of paper and laid it out on a ruler so that I can mark it up. We're going to cut the fabric to be 6 inches from top to bottom. And so I've marked with dotted lines the top and the bottom of my piece of fabric. Then 1/4 inch in is where the edge of the mask is going to be, after that's allowing for the seam allowance. And then at the 4-inch mark, I'm counting up from the bottom. At the 4-inch mark, you're going to mark one of those pleats. At 2.5 inches, a second pleat. At 1 inch, the third pleat. So mark that up for the ruler, and we'll use that when we're setting the pleats. Setting the pleats is not a perfect science. You can also eyeball it, but I like to mark it out. The first thing we're going to do is put the ear loops on. And you can see I've taken the fabric face up and I've attached the ribbon or elastic or whatever I'm using at the corners of the narrow end. So this is the end of our mask. The ears are going to be out here. And we've got our ear loops set. And I just attach them. You can sew it across or sew it up and down. It doesn't make any difference. You just want to give it a good firm setting on each end. Then we're going to add the backing. So right sides together. So the piece that we just saw is underneath here and my ear loop is in the middle between these two pieces of fabric. And I've pinned it so that it's set the same way. And you can see I marked the starting point and the end point with a green ended pin here at the starting point and a red pin at the ending point. That's just to remind me to stop sewing here. So you can just remember your own self if you want to, but at least the first few that you do, I like to mark it so that I remember and don't accidentally sew the whole together. So this part we're going to leave open. Between the red part, the red pin and the green pin will be open, and we're going to use that opening in order to turn our piece right side out. So we're going to sew from the green pin all the way around this piece to sew these two pieces together and stop at the red pin. Then once I've done that, I'm going to notch the corners, and what we're doing is we're debulking this corner so that when we turn it, we're going to get a nice neat turn. And you can see here I blew up this picture so that you can see you want to leave several threads beyond your seam so that that's not going to unravel here. So leave several threads there, but I've taken this bulk out so we don't have that bulk jammed all in this corner when we turn it. So now we turn it right side out and you can see the corners came out pretty well. Has a little bit of bulk here, but that's not a big deal. Okay, so we've turned it right side out. Here's our opening, but we've folded it neatly so that you can scarcely tell it's there, and we're going to sew it together when we do it, when we sew around the outside. Right now I've taken my little ruler and laid it out and set pins wherever I mark those out pleats. And then once I've done that, I can put pins on the other side too, or I can just eyeball it when I turn it to iron it. And I'm going to iron pleats at those corners. Those are my out pleats. So you want a sharp edge that you will press there so that when you turn it, you'll be able to tell where the pleats are. And here I'm pleating it. Using those out creases one at a time, you put them up, and you want to form about a ½ inch pleat, nesting them together and pinning them at each end. Notice that I've got the pins headed out because this is where we're going to sew, and the sewing machine's not going to go over the head of the pin for sure, but the point of the pin is better. And here you can see the edges. I've nested them together so that where the top of this pleat is, the bottom of the next pleat hasn't quite started. And that's to keep you from having too many layers of fabric, because you've got this plus the seam allowance on the back and seam allowance and the backing. So we've already got 4 layers of fabric here. Now, because of the pleat, we've got another 4 layers and another 4 layers under that. So here at this point, we have 4, 8, 12 layers of fabric. And that's going to be a challenge for that sewing machine. And in addition to that, we have the ribbon or the elastic, whatever's going on. So we've got 12 layers of fabric plus that, the tie, whatever the tie is. And that's a big challenge for your sewing machine. So you're going to have to work with your sewing machine to make this happen and not break a needle. Because if you force the sewing machine, you can easily break a needle. So be careful. So now we're all pinned, we're ready to do it. And now we have to take a look at our sewing machine and get to know our sewing machine. We're going to stitch all the way around, which will hold the pleats together. It's going to close this bottom hole from the turning that we did. And so the top stitching looks like this. This is called top stitching. And you can see here I'm about 1/8 of an inch from the bottom and the top, but I'm 1/4 of an inch from this end. So why 1/4 of an inch? And the reason for that is that here's where I've got my 12 layers plus elastic. But if I come in just inside of that seam allowance, now I'm down to 6 layers. Okay, so that's why you want to stay a little bit farther from this end. It's going to be less challenging for your sewing machine. We've got lots of layers going on there. Let's take a look at the sewing machine. Let me just tell you a couple things about your sewing machine, and you'll need to look at your own. This is mine, and there are differences. Every sewing machine is a little bit different. So let's take a look at this one. This guy is called the presser foot, and that's the foot that surrounds the needle and holds the fabric down. It holds the fabric against what are called the feed dogs. These feed dogs are like little tractor feet, and they actually move the fabric. So if you crank your sewing machine, you'll see those guys moving. They go around almost in a circle and moving the fabric forward so that you can sew at an even pace. Look where they are. You can see they're outside of the needle. They're about 1/4 of an inch from the needle. And this is a FAF machine. A FAF machine has a few more in the back. So there are a couple of extra little feed dogs in the back. But notice that they're not right against the needle. They're back a ways from the needle. So the needle comes down and goes through this hole. And do you see this bright spot? I wanted to point that out because that's a mistake I made. It was actually made by the needle, and it broke the needle because I had accidentally moved that needle so that it hit the metal part. And when that skinny little needle hits the metal part, it breaks or bends or both. But this is why you should wear glasses when you work your sewing machine, especially when you're doing difficult things, because if you break a needle, that little piece can fly. So that's what we want to keep in mind. These feed dogs are 1/4 of an inch back, and they're 1/4 of an inch to the side. All right, so why do we need to know that? Because when we start moving the material, here I've got a 1/4 inch seam. This is a 1/4 inch quilting foot. And I'm a 1/4 inch from the edge of the fabric. Look where the feed dog is. This feed dog is off the side. So the only feed dog that's really engaged here is the one on our left. And the little guys in the back are helping too. But when you first start that piece of fabric and the feed dogs are not yet engaged in the back, you may need to help it move. So when you turn a corner, you'll pivot on the needle. But when you first start, you may have to coax your machine along. I'll show you that in a minute. This quilting foot, I thought I would show you this also. This particular quilting foot has these horizontal marks. That's to tell you that you're a 1/4 of an inch from the edge of the fabric. So if I set the red edge on the corner of the fabric, I know I'm a 1/4 of an inch from the end. And I'm going to leave the needle down, raise up my presser foot, and pivot the fabric on that needle in order to make the turn. That'll give you a nice, neat turn. Okay, so here we are. We're going to sew across these folds. Remember I said it's really bulky, and you can see here I'm close. So I'm on that 12 layers of fabric right there. And is the machine really working, or is the needle going up and down in the very same spot? And in the beginning, it may well try to do that. So what you do is you lift up the presser foot, move the fabric forward just one stitch worth, and then let the needle go down again. So here my needle is up. I could raise the presser foot and move the fabric, and then I let the needle come down. So coax your machine along. Don't force it, because if you move that needle, you could break the needle. Stop 1/4 of an inch from the edge with your needle down. Pivot on the needle. So you're coming down the long side now. So all the way down the long side, about 1/8 of an inch. And you can see this is a 1/4 inch foot. So I've got it about 1/8 of an inch from the edge. And I'm going to come on down and notice where that presser foot is. Sorry, where the feed dog is. The feed dog is off the fabric. So the only feed dog that's engaged is the one that's over here on the left. And so sometimes if you put your hand on the left and sort of help it move along, you can keep it engaged on the feed dog. Turn it, coax it. When you come up these open ends, you may have to smooth the fabric. So here you can see I picked up the presser foot. I'm smoothing the fold back under the presser foot to get it to go in the right way. And we're done. We've got it all nicely top stitched and stitched all the way around. And you're all set. So just remember, wash your hands before you put your mask on. Don't touch your face while you're wearing it. Remove it carefully. It's now dirty. Consider it contaminated. You want to wash it after you use it, and then wash your hands after you handled it. So air dry it or dry it in the drying machine, either way, whatever is available for you. Do not put it in the microwave if there's any metal in it. If you make the ones without sewing, it sometimes has staples or pins, or some of the masks have a little metal strip over the nose to keep your glasses from fogging up and to keep it tighter around your nose. You can do that with a twist tie, or you can take a strip of aluminum foil and fold it down to the size of a twist tie and put that in over your nose if you want to keep your glasses from fogging up. So that'll work. And I hope that you did well making your mask, and that you will stay well through this crisis, and we'll make it through. Together, we'll be able to do it. But it takes everybody wearing a mask outside, staying 6 feet away, and washing your hands every time you possibly think about it. Be well, and I'll see you soon. Take care.